The Lura Prime Alliance's LPA outer defenses were crumbling. A tidal wave of bioorganic terror swept through the outer solar system, shredding everything in its path. The LPA's sentry stations, automated and designed to ward off opportunistic raiders, were powerless against the relentless swarm of the void. These alien invaders, an amalgamation of flesh and metal, swarmed like locusts, devouring every ounce of resistance the LPA could muster. In the cold vacuum of space, the LPA's massive orbital fortresses fired their heavy cannons with deadly precision, the roar of energy bolts echoing through the vast emptiness. Seasoned veterans of countless skirmishes stood at the helm of these fortresses, their eyes hardened with resolve. But the void was unlike anything they had ever seen. Their ships were alive, grotesque creations of sinew and metal that absorbed punishment far beyond the capacity of standard vessels. With sheer numbers and brutal efficiency, the void overwhelmed the fortresses, tearing them apart piece by piece. Deep within the heart of Lura Prime, the Council of Elders watched in horror as the holographic displays in the Chamber of Harmony painted a grim picture of their defeat. The once serene faces of the elders were etched with despair, their hope dwindling with every passing moment. "We cannot hold them back," Elder Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "Our defenses are failing." Elder Orion, the head of the council, clenched his fists, his eyes burning with determination. "We will not give up. We are a resourceful people. There must be something we can do." "Send out a distress signal," Elder Lyra said, her voice growing more desperate. Perhaps someone will come to our aid." Orion hesitated. The galaxy was vast, and help, if it came at all, could be too late. But they had no choice. The signal was sent, echoing through the stars, a desperate plea for salvation. Hours passed. Just as hope seemed to fade entirely, a transmission crackled through the comms. "This is Admiral Rowan Bailey of the Human Systems Alliance," a deep, resolute voice declared. "We've received your distress call. Sit tight, Lura. Human Warship Incoming." Aboard the HS Indomitable, Admiral Rowan Bailey stood tall on the bridge, his stern gaze fixed on the tactical display in front of him. The chaotic mess of data, enemy ship formations, tactical readouts, and casualty reports painted a grim picture of the ongoing battle in the Lura system. His officers moved with quiet efficiency, preparing for the inevitable clash. "Captain Michaels," Bailey barked, his voice echoing across the bridge. "I need a full assessment. What are we up against?" Captain Ariana Michaels, a seasoned officer with a sharp tactical mind, stepped forward. "The Void Fleet is massive, Admiral. Their bioorganic ships are resilient and adapt quickly. Their fighters are fast and nimble, but they lack the discipline we're used to. Their capital ships, however, are a different story. They're heavily armed and shielded, and their collective consciousness allows them to coordinate attacks with eerie precision." Bailey nodded, absorbing the information. "And their weaknesses?" Michaels pointed to the holographic display. "Their weapons systems are exposed. If we can disable those, we'll cripple them." Bailey's eyes narrowed. "Good. Lieutenant Commander Singh, any intel on the Void's motives?" Lieutenant Commander Vikram Singh, the ship's intelligence officer, scanned his data. "They've come from the Paris Arm, Admiral. We don't know much about their goals, but their actions suggest a hunger for conquest. They assimilate entire civilizations." "Conquest," Bailey muttered, his fists clenching. "They've picked the wrong planet." The HSS Indomitable surged forward, its powerful engines roaring to life. As the ship approached the Lura system, the Void Fleet came into view, a massive, writhing mass of grotesque ships, pulsating with eerie bioluminescence. Admiral Bailey's lips curled into a grim smile. "Showtime," he said, his voice filled with steel. "All hands, prepare for combat. Let's show these bastards what humans can do." While the HS Indomitable prepared to engage the Void Fleet in space, the situation on the ground grew increasingly dire. In the crystalline city of Helios, Lura civilians cowered in fear as the void forces descended from the skies. Their bioorganic warships unleashed grotesque creatures onto the streets, twisted abominations of flesh and metal, relentless in their hunger for destruction. Lura warriors, armed with energy blades and precision rifles, fought back bravely. But for every void soldier they cut down, 2 more took its place. The tide was turning against them. Sergeant Major Thomas Hammer Harrison, a battle-hardened Marine, stood at the helm of a squad of human soldiers deployed to reinforce the Lura ground forces. As their dropship touched down amidst the chaos, Harrison barked orders, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "Move, secure the perimeter, keep those things away from the civilians." The Marines disembarked swiftly, taking up defensive positions around the Lura refugees huddled in makeshift shelters. Harrison's pulse rifle hummed with power as he fired controlled bursts at the approaching void soldiers, each shot hitting its mark. Nearby, a young Lura civilian named Nira clutched a makeshift weapon, her face pale with fear, but her resolve strong. She had lost her family in the initial invasion and had vowed to protect those who remained. "You," Harrison called out, pointing at Nira. "Stick close to us. We'll get you through this." Nara nodded, her grip tightening on her weapon. Together, the human Marines and the Lura civilians fought back, pushing the void forces to a standstill. But even as they held the line, more of the enemy ships appeared in the sky, casting a shadow over the battlefield. "Admiral," Harrison growled into his comm, "we're gonna need some serious firepower down here, or we're not going to last much longer." Admiral Bailey's eyes flicked to the tactical display, where the situation on Lura Prime grew more desperate by the second. His hand hovered over the comms button. "Captain Michaels, focus fire on their capital ships. Target their weapon systems and shield generators. We need to buy our ground forces some time." "Aye, sir," Michaels replied, her hands already flying across the controls. The HSS Indomitable unleashed a barrage of energy bolts and missiles, the ship's forward batteries glowing with heat as they fired with precision. The Void capital ships, massive and heavily armored, shook under the onslaught. Their organic hulls pulsed as they tried to absorb the damage, but the relentless human assault was too much for them to handle. One of the Void ships, its bioluminescent glow flickering, began to break apart, its pieces tumbling into the void of space. But even with the destruction of a capital ship, the Void fleet continued their assault, adapting to the loss with terrifying speed. On the ground, Sergeant Harrison and his squad were locked in brutal urban combat. The narrow streets of Alios were filled with the sounds of energy rifles and the screeches of void creatures. The Lura civilians, led by Nira, had joined the fight, their fear replaced by a burning desire to defend their home. Nora herself fought fiercely, using her knowledge of the city's layout to guide the Marines through the chaos. "We've got them pinned," Harrison yelled, his voice hoarse from the intensity of the fight. "Keep up the pressure." Suddenly, Nera spotted something in the distance, a towering figure among the Void soldiers, larger and more grotesque than the others. It moved with deliberate precision, directing the Void forces with chilling efficiency. "Sergeant, over there," she shouted, pointing. "That's their leader. If we take it out, the rest might fall into disarray." Harrison narrowed his eyes, scanning the battlefield. The creature was clearly a commander, its massive form directing the hordes with fluid gestures. He knew she was right, cut off the head, and the body would falter. Marines' new objective: take down that leader now. With renewed focus, Harrison's squad pushed forward, cutting through the Void forces with a ferocity that matched the enemy's. Nora led the way, guiding them through narrow alleyways and over collapsed buildings to get within striking distance. As they closed in on the commander, the creature turned its attention toward them. It raised a massive, twisted arm, energy crackling from its grotesque appendages. But before it could strike, Harrison raised his pulse rifle, and with a single, well-placed shot, sent the commander crushing to the ground in a shower of sparks and bioorganic fluids. The remaining Void soldiers hesitated, their movements becoming erratic. Nora gasped as the creatures seemed to lose their coordination, flailing about without direction. "It's working," Harrison muttered. "Push forward." With the Void forces thrown into chaos, the Human Marines and Lura civilians pressed their advantage, driving the enemy back inch by inch. Above them, the battle in space raged on, but for the first time since the invasion began, there was a glimmer of hope. In space, the human fleet continued its fierce assault on the Void. The HSS Indomitable led the charge, its railguns and energy cannons cutting through the bioorganic ships with ruthless efficiency. But as they fought, the sensors on the bridge picked up something ominous. More Void ships were approaching, reinforcements from the dark reaches of space. "Admiral, we've got incoming," Lieutenant Commander Singh warned, her voice tense. "It's a new wave of Void reinforcements." Bailey's jaw clenched. "We can't let them overwhelm us." "Tactical, how many ships?" "Too many, sir," Singh replied, "but they're still a few minutes out." Bailey turned to Captain Michaels. "We need to take out that Void flagship before their reinforcements arrive. It's the nerve center of their fleet. If we can disable it, we might disrupt their entire operation." Michaels nodded. "Understood, Admiral." The HSS Indomitable adjusted its course, heading straight for the massive Void flagship. The ship loomed large in the distance, its organic hull pulsating with a malevolent energy. Bailey's eyes were fixed on the display, his mind racing with calculations. "Ramirez, target their command and control systems," Bailey ordered. "Focus fire on their shield generators and weapons. We need that ship crippled." Lieutenant Commander Ramirez, the ship's weapons officer, acknowledged the command and began firing the Indomitable's heavy weapons. Railgun projectiles and energy beams lanced through space, slamming into the flagship's shields with devastating force. The Void flagship reeled from the attack, its organic structure struggling to maintain cohesion. On the ground, Harrison and his squad continued their fight against the disoriented Void forces, but the respite was short-lived. From the sky, more Void ships descended, landing reinforcements that threatened to undo all of their hard-won progress. "Damn it," Harrison growled. "We need air support down here now." The Human Marines fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. Just as it seemed the battle was about to turn against them, a deafening explosion rocked the battlefield. The skies above lit up as the Void flagship, now crippled from the Indomitable's assault, exploded in a blinding flash of light. The remaining Void forces on the ground, cut off from their command structure, began to falter. Their cohesion shattered, they turned into mindless beasts, attacking without purpose or strategy. "Now's our chance," Nira shouted, rallying the Lura civilians. Together with the Marines, they launched a final assault, driving the last of the Void soldiers from the city. The battle was over, but the cost was great. Lura Prime lay in ruins, its cities shattered, and its people scared by the horrors of war. The Human Marines and the Lura civilians stood side by side, exhausted but victorious. Sergeant Harrison surveyed the destruction with a heavy heart, knowing that while they had won the battle, the war was far from over. Admiral Bailey stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the remnants of the Void fleet retreat into the darkness of space. The price of victory weighed heavily on his shoulders. "Send the message," he said quietly. "Let them know we've held the line for now." As the survivors began to rebuild, the bond between humanity and the Lura grew stronger. They had fought together, bled together, and triumphed against a common enemy. But as they gazed out into the stars, they knew that the Void was not gone for good. More challenges lay ahead, and the galaxy would need every ounce of their strength and ingenuity to survive. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. The question now was, what would come next?